Welcome back, everyone, to my first viewer-selected deck tech. You might think that since this is not a deck I have personally built, we won't be doing a deep dive, but you'd be dead wrong. I've got a brand to maintain. Toxrill the Corrosive is a hefty powerhouse of a commander, guaranteed to make your opponent salty, which is unfortunate for him because he's a slug, but he'll make do. So Toxrill is a 7-drop, 5 and 2 black, legendary creature slug horror. It reads, at the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them, and whenever a creature you don't control the slime counter on it dies, you make a slug token. That's a 1/1. And for blue-black, sacrifice a slug, draw a card. So this will, every turn cycle, shrink your opponent's teams by 4. This will kill most things. It will make you slugs you can sacrifice to draw cards. You want to profit off death. You want to protect this commander because it is like the linchpin of your strategy. This is a control commander. Because it's so toxic, we're going to go with Infect as a win con and throw in a few other win conditions as well. Our main goal is to proliferate a bunch and kill with Infect. We want to ramp as best we can and control the board, giving our opponents little peace treaty creatures that are actually our slug sleeper agents. By the time Toxrill comes down, it should be eating enough creatures to ensure we have blockers. For this deck, we're going to have ramp, counter spells for our commander, reanimate effects that are mostly here to buy back Toxrill, things to help shrink our opponent's creatures, including some wraths, things to ensure more creatures become one with the slugs by making additional creatures, for our opponents even, things that profit from death, some poison counter enablers and a proliferate engine, other massive threats. Let's be real, Toxrill's a lightning rod for removal, so backup plans never hurt anybody, and some utility lands. So for ramp, as I mentioned before, 7 in a non-green card identity is a lot of mana to pay, so we need to ramp. In the mirror, we're going to try our best. As far as basic mana rocks, we have Soul Ring and Wayfarer's Bauble to start, as well as Talisman of Dominance, Thought Vessel for no max hand size, and Arcane Signet, Mind Stone to cycle for cards late game, and Worn Power Stone because we desperately need it. This one taps for 2, which is kind of nice, even if it comes in tapped. I prefer not to run Signets, but you could. I just think they're bad. Then for the 3-drops upside, we have Misleading Signpost to deflect an attacker coming our way, and believe me, they will come our way. We're the bad guy, so we have to prepare for that eventuality. Also, Midnight Clock will tick up to let us refill our hand, and with all of our proliferate effects, it will happen much sooner than our opponents are prepared for. Mana Drain is a busted game changer that will let us power out Toxrill early, the turn after trading 1-for-1 with mid to large spell, all for just 2 mana. Yes, please. We're also in black and have access to Dark Ritual, and so we should run it. And let me tell you, as a Sauron player, having it come down 2 turns earlier is a massive game changer. Search for a Scant will filter our draws, and then flip in the mid-game once our graveyard is developed to be an extra land, which we can sink mana into to find non-creature spells. That's a lot of our deck, and separately we want to be holding up counter spells and removal basically all game, because again, we are a control deck. We need to have the answers, and if there's no threats presented, we can then just draw a card effectively in the top 4.
We have Revel Riches for truckloads of mana and a nice alternative win con.
That will aid in ramping us right up until the point when the game in our upkeep. Your opponent's creatures will die a lot, and so it's very possible to just Toxrill and then just cast Revel when the game next upkeep if they don't stop you. Revel is nice because curves nicely into it. If one creature died, you get the treasure and you play a land, or 2 treasures, don't play a land, play Toxrill.
Even if they kill Revel,
It's still a spell that could have hit Toxrill possibly. And if they do stop you, you probably got some mana along the way. Lastly, for ramp, we have Solemn Simulacrum. It's a speed bump for our opponents. The ramp's a basic and draws us a card. Sometimes commander players get the roots, but this card is still playable, albeit in fewer decks in 2025. But this is definitely one of them. You need to preserve your life total, you need to draw cards, you need to ramp. It does all those things. Not every card's a touchdown. Sometimes you gotta kick a field goal. We're also running Expedition Map into Tolaria West to get us the Cabal Coffers and Urborg combo, and Urza's Cave. These also get other utility lands, but these are probably what we're getting to make sure we can cast Toxrill again if it dies, or just have extra mana lying around. Our commander is wet and wild with tons of mucus flying everywhere, so we're going to want protection. It's a slug. We don't know where it's been. Fierce Guardianship is perfect here. To be honest, it's always perfect except for its financial cost, but our commander's expensive and not a green. We want to stick around and can't afford to reliably recast it. This should be safe to protect your commander or stop an opponent from winning the game. In that exact moment, no exception, keep Toxrill alive. That is the main plan, is to keep Toxrill alive. We also have Swan Song, 1 mana stop removal spell, which is again our priority, and the 2/2 is an upside here as this creature to die and become a slug. Arcane Denial is here to ensure we don't go down on cards, and usually has less sting for our opponents, and the less salty they are before Toxrill hits, the better, as a lot of our defense relies on those slug blockers, and until like turn 5, 6, 7, we're just playing defense, like fully playing defense. Even once Toxrill hits, we're playing defense, but it's much easier. Until Toxrill hits, you need to get to the late game. Mana Drain, while primarily a ramp spell, does in fact say counter target spell. It's perfect to lead into or to protect a Toxrill. Drown in the Lock is a perfect kill spell or counter spell depending on our opponent's graveyard, which should be stocked based on our commander, much to their dismay. Malakir Rebirth is not as versatile as a counter spell, but it's a 1 mana way to save your commander from a removal spell. We're running Reanimate as our primary reanimate effect. I'd rather pay 1 mana and 7 life for my commander than 9 mana if it died once. And this can get other threats too, but you're mostly saving it for Toxrill. That emergence is pretty sweet. It's basically Zombify, it brings back a creature, but for one more mana, you also get to proliferate once, which if Toxrill was out and died, you'll then shrink everything further and then go to end step, shrink it again, and this will help you proc the infect even more. Virtual Persistence is a nice removal spell early on that eats a small thing, gets some life, and then the enchantment in the late game is insane. It will get back our commander every single turn, and if they can't kill Virtue, Toxrill will stay in play at each of our upkeeps. But it gets even better because if you have Toxrill in play, it's not just our graveyard. You can just steal your opponent's stuff, which will be dying because Toxrill's in play. The Toxrill is one of the unique commanders that can end the game by itself. If it shrinks the entire board into oblivion, it's a 7-power attacker. It'll kill a player in 3 turns. So keep that in mind when you play this deck. You have Infect,
Revel in Riches.
combo kills, and your commander just killing players from commander damage. We also have Dread Return. It's reanimated for 4, but then separately you can flashback it by sacrificing 3 creatures. And if Toxrill was out, we'll have those slugs, then get it back for free. I'm always a huge proponent of Dread Return. The card's busted, but especially in this deck, you should run it. We have a lot of things to help shrink our opponent's creatures that are also threats. Toxrill does a great job on its own of making our opponent's armies lackluster, but until he hits the board, we need to protect ourselves. Enter the plethora of other sweepers and shrinkers we run. Maha's Feathers Knight is a house. Not only is it a 6/5 flamper for 5, power creep much, it also sets the power toughness of our opponent's creatures to 1. Comboing Toxrill itself, or any way to get -1/-1, like for instance Toxic Deluge. This card is another reason to play Black in Commander, and you should run it to keep you alive early. Late game you can pay less life and still get the job done. Toxrill in play. Medoc Massacre is less mana efficient, but it doubles as a win con and is tutorable off and bottom of the mixture. You can run actual tutors too. I personally don't run a mono tutor anymore. It's just like too low hanging of a fruit, and I want to use my game changers on cards that I find interesting. And that paradigm shift to me personally is one of the biggest successes of the whole game changers and bracket system. Massacre Room is a threat in its own right that also doubles as tons of reach, as it shrinks things by 2 on the way in, and their controllers lose 2 life for each creature that dies. All of these become so much more potent with Toxrill out. Massacre Known Killer is like our secret commander. It gives all our creatures Wither, which means they deal damage in the form of -1/-1 counters, which is proliferatable. Also, it has Menace, which is not quite flavor text, but it might as well be. You aren't running her to attack. More importantly, whenever a creature in opponent controls dies, if its toughness is less than 1, for a multitude of shrink effects, draw a card. This lets us permanently reduce our opponent's battlefields, much like Toxrill, and then turns our commander's ability to overdrive, drawing cards left and right. We've got Midnight Banshee, which is like Toxrill Light. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a -1/-1 counter on each non-black creature, which is only like 3 to 4 creatures in our deck, and will probably be most of our opponent's creatures. And it's also got Wither itself. This is worse than Toxrill, but it's a nice backup until he hits the board next turn. And the effects stack. The -1/-1 counters are different than the slime counters. When you proliferate, they get both, and so it's an additional -2/-2 each instance of proliferate. Once Toxrill is already in play, we have Flatline 2 and a blue. It's an instant, and you can make creatures your opponent's control have toughness 1, which will then let them die from Toxrill. So you can do this on end step and just untap with a bunch of slugs and win the game. Instant speed's huge here, but separately, before Toxrill's in play, it also makes their power 0, so this can fog an attack. In addition to ways to shrink creatures, we're running ways to boost the number of creatures our opponents have. You heard me. We want our opponents to have creatures. If they have more creatures, we have more slugs. And who doesn't want more slugs, am I right? This commander is one of the unique ones who actually wants to give our opponents creatures. Toxrill will make more slugs the more creatures our opponents have, so every creature we give them is an investment in the future of slug kind. As far as how to do this, we have Slaughter Specialists, a 3/3 for 2 that enters and gives each opponent 1/1, but whenever a creature they control dies, it gets bigger. This will get huge late game, and early game just is a blocker on the board. Haunted Phantasm enters and makes 5 goblins for target opponent, but for their stream mana, it's a 4/6 unblockable. Keep in mind any X1 should die before it makes it past your turn if you have Toxrill out. So we're really making 5 slugs for ourselves and a 4/6 unblockable for just 3 mana. Now that's value. I prefer this one over Hunted Horror, as Pro Black is relevant, and if 3/3 will survive if Toxrill doesn't make it through the turn cycle, which any savvy opponent will try their best not to allow. Tribute to Hirobi is also amazing. It's a 2-mana saga. 1 and 2 each give each opponent a rat token, and at 3 it flips and you can control all rat token, which could be 0 if your opponents are smart and trade it into each other, or you could be facing a rat kindred player who will swear an oath of vengeance against you because you take its entire board, and it becomes a 3/3 with flying and haste that can sacrifice a creature when it attacks to draw a card, and you will always have creatures to draw a card in the late game. Your slugs are very disposable, as it turns out. Forbidden Orchard's sweet as a land that taps for any color and gives your opponent of your choice a 1/1, which will then die and give you a slug. Once you have Toxrill out, this card is just the best dual land. And even before then, it's still a dual land that comes in untapped, so that's not nothing. And the 1/1's not going to do so much damage to you, you can't handle it. We're also running 2 removal spells in Raven Form and Resculpt that exile the creature, which is super nice on that end, but then separately make a body that will then die. These are nice, and they both hit artifacts, and Raven Form has the added bonus of being able to be foretold and then costing only 1 mana. Genesis Chamber is the absolute best free handout giving card because it gives you creatures, it gives them creatures whenever they play a creature spell. So it just adds more bodies to the board to then become slugs. And it also gives them to you, which is nice. Just when the board is clear, you have all these 1/1s that can just attack people and kill them. This deck gives all new meaning to group slug. We're going to see a lot of things enter and die, so let's abuse that as any good Magic player would. Our first of Lockdown let us drain our opponents for each slug that enters, as well as yourself, and then she can tap and sacrifice a slug without paying mana, unlike our commander, and draw a card. This life gain will help ensure we aren't immediately murdered once our opponents recognize our game plan, though it could actually turn to win condition itself, just because you're draining for so much because you're making so many slugs. Running more opportunities, which draws a card practically every turn, just off Toxrill's passive, but you can force it by mainly sacrificing slugs. Or the next creature, the Henny Undying Partisan. She grows so our opponent's creatures die and can sacrifice one of our creatures whenever she feels like it to gain indestructible and get death or leaves triggers. Similarly, a new Final Fantasy card, Sephiroth, Planet's Heir, enters and shrinks opponent's creatures, -2, -2, then grows whenever one dies, and has vigilance, so it's a massive attacker, and can also block on defense, which we desperately need as a control deck. People will want to attack us on account of us murdering all of their creatures, and so you gotta be ready for that. Miracle Bats will drain our opponents and recreate or sacrifice a token, slug, or treasure, as well as zombies from Field of the Dead. And then while we can kind of use it as a ram spell when creatures die, with our commander out, Revel and Riches, this will pretty handily outright win the game, like in one turn cycle. Now we get to the other fun and statistic part of our deck, Infect. We're only running the best creatures that can infect our opponents, as well as every card that gives each opponent a poison counter that we can possibly run. We want the Proliferate to do the heavy lifting. Special shout out to Freeze's Outbreak from the Infect precon. Each opponent gets a poison counter, then each creature they control gets -1/-1 for each poison counter they have. This is better late game than it is to start the poison train, but being a sweeper also is excellent. We have Prologue to Pheresis and instant speed cantrips that poison each opponent for 1 and a blue. Infectious Inquiry is Nice Whisper for 1 more mana, but it poisons each opponent, and Vraska's Fall makes each opponent sack creature planeswalker, and you guessed it, get a poison counter. Now for creatures, Icarats is amazing because it has Infect and gives each player a poison counter on ATB, which won't matter for you because you won't proliferate yourself, though a 4-way tie sounds like chaotic evil to me. Flesh Eater Imp also gets the nod because you can sack creatures to pump it, letting it one-shot opponents if you have enough slugs for fodder. Viral Drake is a solid 1/4 flying blocker or 1 infected attacker, but you can pump mana into it to proliferate, so it's a unique infect threat in that it has infect and proliferate on the same body. This card's very good. And lastly, Voidwing Hybrid is a 2/1 flyer with Toxic 1 that you can bring back to your hand from your graveyard whenever you proliferate, which should be a lot. And it'll get the infect ball rolling with 1 on each opponent. It's very persistent, which is nice. We don't want to clog our deck with infectors because they're usually weaker cards, but these make the cut as they are either unique or efficient, and you see that first bit of poison proliferate, so you need some infectors in your deck. For proliferate, we already mentioned 2 in Vat Emergence and Viral Drake. We also have Experimental Augury to instant speed, look at 3, and put 1 into the hand, as well as proliferate. Then, Drown and Ichor gives something -4/-4 to kill a small creature, and proliferate. Tezzera's Gambit is excellent as it draws 2 and proliferates for 3 to 4 mana, depending on how much you value life total. Flux Channeler is amazing as every non-creature spell lets you proliferate. This is a creature worth keeping alive with counter spells and copying. Inexorable Tide will win the game if left unchecked. After each spell you cast, proliferate. It's important to note that for this deck, these triggers also shrink every one of your opponent's creatures. This card is amazing in this deck. It will lock your opponents at the board while also poisoning them very, very quickly. Lastly, we have Karn's Bastion for proliferate on the land. This is inefficient, but we can still use it in a pinch, but it's more just a concession to having so many lands to make sure we can cast our 7-drop commander. This card is not something you want to be doing, but something you can do. We have a couple more tests around the deck. Baleful Strix is just a mere value good stuff, draw a card, eat an attack, and trade. Sludge Monster is great. It's one of the few things this deck has that actually synergizes with slime counters. It's a 5 mana 5/5 horror. Whenever each user attacks with slime counter up to 1 target creature, and non-horror creatures with slime counters lose all abilities, and a base power is 2/2. So this will vastly accelerate your commander, and it's just a 5/5, which is not even bad for the rate. We also have Gothmog, Morgul Lieutenant. This is a 3 mana 3/3 that enters and makes a orc army, but more importantly, it gives your tokens Death Touch, meaning your slugs can now trade with more things to make more slugs, and it just feeds itself and gets very out of hand. And we have Spark Double to copy our commander, ideally. Now for lands. We have a lot of utility lands. Glassful Mimic is another MDFC that can be a creature copying effect. Seeker Restoration lets you draw cards and refill your hand, but it comes in untapped. Otawara and Takenuma both have channel effects that can help us out. Otawara bouncing an attacker or a permanent we don't like, and Takenuma getting back a commander if it dies. Field of the Dead will let us just get even more bodies on the board to have a threat. Lord of Carfel and Tomb Fortress are both reanimate effects I could have mentioned earlier, but it's nice because they're lands as well, and you just have them as part of your land base. I'm of the firm opinion these cards should be in every single Dimir deck. Demolition Field to blow up an opponent's utility land, Urza's Cave to search for our lands, as well as Tolaria, which I mentioned earlier, and then Cabal Coffers and Herb to get that mana boost. We're also running both of the man lands because we're going to clear the board, so they're much more effective. Creeping Tar Pit, just a 3/2 unblockable, which is actually kind of good at attacking on its own, and we're going to have a bunch of blockers anyway. But then Restless Reef is a 4/4 Death Touch, which I wouldn't usually run, but given that my opponents will have nothing on the board, this is fine. And the milling of an opponent could help for a Drown Lock. The rest of the lands are just Dimir stuff, and that rounds out the deck. So I actually kind of want to build this deck. It looks pretty fun. Mean but fun. And so make sure your opponents know what they're getting in for when you sit down at the table. Although after the first time they played against it, they'll know what's coming. Which makes the poison waiting for the bubbles to stop as they're drowned beneath the weight of this monstrous slug horror even more satisfying. I hope you like this viewer deck tech. I'm looking to do more of these in the future. I really want to expand the channel. So the best thing that could happen for me is that people see these videos with decks that they like and they show their friends, they subscribe to sfreezy or Commander Wendy's on YouTube, and the channel grows in that way. I'm not currently doing Patreon or anything like that. I may do that in the future, but only if we're really having a lot of these deck type things where there's a lot of demand for the viewer submitted commanders. I'm not going to do this on a first come first serve basis, but if deck was interesting, I'll definitely do it. And I may even post votes in the end of the video to have more of these happen. But if it's reasonable or the demand is low, I do want to try and get to everybody, as long as the deck's not like something like ridiculous like a My Little Pony deck. Not saying you can't build that deck. I'm just not going to. Because I like Commander. I have Commander decks that I've made, but this is fun for me just to brew random decks. I'd like to continue doing that as well. Even for this deck, I really enjoyed brewing it. I was looking through my cards, like how many of these cards do I actually own? Like, could I make this deck? So thank you to Mr. Cryptus for the great suggestion. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you guys want to see more videos by me, just click any of these boxes here. It'll direct you to my playlist of deep dive deck techs or the newest video, hopefully. Stay frosty out there.